The dust devil spun across the empty plains like a harbinger of doom, and Kade Warren watched it from his saddle with the kind of resignation only a man down to his last dollar could muster. The year was 1879, and the New Mexico Territory stretched endlessly before him, a landscape of red earth and sparse vegetation that tested every soul brave or foolish enough to call it home. Cimarron lay somewhere behind him, a memory of whiskey and card games that had not gone his way, and ahead was nothing but the promise of hard work at a ranch near Raton if he could make it there without starving first. His horse, a sorrel mare named Copper, plodded along with her head low, as tired and hungry as he was. They had been traveling since dawn, and the sun now hung high and merciless in the cloudless sky. The Santa Fe Trail stretched out like a ribbon of hope and despair, marked by the wagon ruts of countless travelers who had passed this way seeking better lives out west. That was when he saw the wagon, tilted at an odd angle off the trail, one wheel clearly broken. No horses stood nearby, which meant they had either been stolen or had run off. A woman in a faded blue dress knelt beside the wheel, her dark hair coming loose from its pins, and even from a distance, Kade could see the slump of defeat in her shoulders. He should have ridden past. Any sensible man would have. He had nothing to offer, no supplies to spare, and barely enough money to buy himself a meal before reaching Raton. But his mother had raised him better than that, even if she had been gone these past 10 years, and his father before her. The lessons of decency did not fade just because a man's pockets were empty. Kade guided Copper toward the wagon, and the woman looked up sharply at the sound of hoofbeats. Her face was smudged with dust and streaked with what might have been tears, though she had clearly tried to wipe them away. She was young, perhaps 20 or 21, with dark eyes that held both fear and a stubborn pride that Kade recognized immediately. It was the look of someone who had learned not to trust easily. "Madam," he said, touching the brim of his hat as he brought Copper to a stop. "Looks like you have found yourself in a predicament." "That is one way to put it," she said, her voice hoarse from what he guessed was hours of calling for help that never came. "My wagon wheel broke about 3 hours ago and my horses spooked and ran off. I have been trying to fix it, but I do not have the right tools, and even if I did, I am not sure I would know how." Kade dismounted and walked around the wagon, assessing the damage. The wheel was not just broken but completely shattered, the wooden spokes splintered beyond any simple repair. Even if he had tools, it would take hours to fix properly, and they would need a whole new wheel really. "This is not something that can be fixed out here," he said honestly. "You would need a wheelwright or at least a replacement wheel. Where were you headed?" "Raton," she said, and something in her voice caught his attention. She was not just traveling. She was running, though, from what he could not say. "I have family there, supposedly. An aunt who wrote saying I could come stay with her. I left Kansas 2 weeks ago. You have been traveling alone." Kade could not keep the surprise from his voice. A woman traveling alone across the territory was not unheard of, but it was dangerous as hell, especially on these stretches where bandits and worse roamed freely. "I had a traveling companion for the first week, another family heading west, but they turned south toward Santa Fe." She stood up, brushing the dust from her skirt in a gesture that seemed more about maintaining dignity than actual cleanliness. "I thought I could make the rest of the journey alone." Clearly, I was mistaken. Kade looked at the sun, calculating distances and time. "Raton is about 30 miles from here, too far to walk before dark, and you should not be out here alone overnight." He paused, thinking through his options, none of which were good. "There is a small settlement about 8 miles back the way I came. More of a trading post than a town, but they have a stable and a place you could stay while we figure out how to get your wagon fixed." "I do not have much money," she admitted, and the way she said it told him she had even less than much. "I spent most of what I had on supplies for the journey." Kade reached into his pocket and pulled out his last silver dollar, the single coin that stood between him and complete destitution. He looked at it for a long moment, thinking about the hot meal it could buy, the night in a real bed instead of on the hard ground. Then he thought about his mother and the stories she used to tell about helping others, about how kindness had a way of coming back around. He held the coin out to the woman. "Take this. It should be enough to get you a night at the trading post and a meal. I will ride back and let them know you are coming, then come back with a horse for you." She stared at the coin, then at him, her dark eyes wide with disbelief. "I cannot take your money. You look like you need it as much as I do." "I will manage," Kade said, though he had no idea how. "You cannot stay out here." "But this is your last dollar," she said, somehow knowing without him saying it. "I can see it in your face." "Then you can also see that I have made up my mind," he replied, pressing the coin into her palm. Her hand was smaller than his, and her fingers were cold despite the heat of the day. "My name is Kade Warren, and I am not in the habit of leaving women stranded in the desert." She closed her fingers around the coin slowly, as if still not quite believing this was happening. "Zara Thornton," she said quietly, "and I do not know how to thank you." "No thanks needed," Kade said, though his stomach was already growling at the thought of the meal he had just given away. "Just promise me you will head to that trading post and wait for me there. I will be back within a few hours." "How can I repay you?" Zara asked, and there was something in her voice that went beyond simple gratitude. She looked at him as if trying to understand what kind of man would give his last dollar to a stranger. "Stay safe," Kade said simply. "That will be repayment enough." He helped her gather what supplies she could carry from the wagon, which was not much. A small bag of clothes, a tin of biscuits that had seen better days, and a leather-bound book that she clutched like it was worth more than gold. The rest would have to stay with the wagon, and they both knew there was a good chance it would be picked clean by travelers or bandits before they could return for it. Kade lifted her onto Copper's saddle, and the mare shifted but did not protest the extra weight. He would walk alongside, leading the horse back the way he had come. It would take longer, but there was no other choice. As they started back along the trail, Zara spoke again. "You did not ask what I am running from." "Not my business," Kade replied, though he was curious. "We have all got things in our past we would rather leave there." "My husband died 6 months ago," she said, and the words came out flat, emotionless. "Cholera. We had a farm in Kansas, but I could not manage it alone, and his brother wanted to take it from me." Said a woman had no business trying to run a farm by herself. "He made things difficult, and when my aunt's letter came, I decided to leave before things got worse." "I am sorry about your husband," Kade said, meaning it. "We married young, barely knew each other," Zara continued, as if now that she had started talking she could not stop. "It was an arrangement between families, and he was kind enough, but we never really loved each other." "Does that sound terrible?" "Sounds honest," Kade said. He had seen enough arranged marriages and marriages of convenience to know that love was often a luxury people could not afford. "You are still mourning, though. I can see it." "Not him so much as the life I thought I would have," she admitted. "I thought I would have children, a home, something stable. Instead, I am riding through the desert with a stranger who just gave me his last dollar, and I do not even know where I will be sleeping tomorrow night." "At your aunt's house in Rattan," Kade said firmly. "We will get you there." "You keep saying we, but I still do not understand why you are helping me." Kade was quiet for a moment, listening to the steady clop of Copper's hooves and the whisper of wind across the plains. "My mother used to say that we are all just one bad day away from needing help ourselves." She believed in paying kindness forward, said it was like planting seeds that might grow into something good down the line. She sounds like a wise woman. She was, Kade agreed. Died when I was 15, but I still hear her voice sometimes, telling me to do the right thing even when it is the hard thing. They walked in companionable silence for a while after that, the sun beginning its slow descent toward the western horizon. Kade's feet ached in his boots, and his stomach continued to remind him that he had not eaten since yesterday. But there was something right about this, about helping Zara, that made the discomfort bearable. The trading post appeared as the sun touched the distant mountains, a collection of low, adobe buildings clustered around a well. Smoke rose from a chimney, and Kade could see horses in the corral beside the stable. The place was run by a man named Samuel Harris, a former trapper who had decided that selling supplies to travelers was safer and more profitable than risking his scalp for beaver pelts. Samuel came out to meet them, his weathered face breaking into a smile when he recognized Kade. "Warren. Did not expect to see you back this way. Thought you were headed to Raton for that job." "Change of plans," Kade said, helping Zara down from the saddle. "This is Miss Thornton. Her wagon broke down about 8 miles up the trail and she needs a place to stay for the night." Samuel's sharp eyes took in the situation immediately, and Kade saw understanding dawn on his face. "I've got a room available, clean sheets and a hot meal." Zara held out the silver dollar and Samuel took it with a nod. "This will cover tonight and breakfast in the morning." "You look like you could use both." "Thank you," Zara said, her relief evident. Samuel looked at Kade. "What about you? You look half-starved." "I will be fine," Kade lied. "Just need to water my horse and then I will be on my way." "The hell you will," Samuel said bluntly. "You just walked 8 miles in this heat. You can at least come inside and have some water and rest before you do anything stupid." He looked at Zara. "Excuse my language, madam. I have heard worse," she said with a small smile. Inside the trading post, the temperature dropped mercifully, the thick adobe walls keeping out the worst of the heat. Samuel's wife, a quiet Jicarilla Apache woman named She Who Waits, brought out cups of cool water and set them on the rough wooden table without a word. Kade drank gratefully, feeling the water ease the dryness in his throat. "Now then," Samuel said, settling into a chair with a creak of old wood. "Let us talk about this wagon situation. You say it is 8 miles out, give or take," Kade confirmed. "The wheel is completely shattered." "She would need a replacement." Samuel scratched his beard thoughtfully. "I've got an old wagon wheel in the back, from a prairie schooner that someone abandoned here last year. Might fit, might not, but it is worth a try." "Problem is, even with a good wheel, that wagon is not going anywhere without horses to pull it." "My horses ran off when the wheel broke," Zara explained. "I do not know where they went." "They probably did not go far," Samuel said. "Horses usually head for water when they spook." "There is a creek about 2 miles north of where you were. If they are still in the area, that is where they will be." "I can look for them tomorrow," Kade offered, though he had no idea how he would eat in the meantime. He had given away his last dollar, and pride would not let him ask for charity. Samuel gave him a long look. "You gave her your last money, did not you?" Kade did not answer, which was answer enough. "You are a damned fool, Warren," Samuel said, but there was affection in his voice. "Lucky for you, I have got some work needs doing around here. You help me tomorrow, and I will feed you and give you a place to sleep." "Fair trade." "More than fair," Kade said, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. Zara was looking at him with an expression he could not quite read. "You really did give me your last dollar." "It was not doing me much good anyway," Kade said, trying to make light of it. "She Who Waits brought out bowls of stew then, rich with meat and vegetables, and fresh bread that was still warm from the oven." Zara ate like she had not seen food in days, which Kade suspected might not be far from the truth. He ate more slowly, savoring every bite, knowing this might be his only good meal for a while. After dinner, Samuel showed Zara to a small room off the main trading area. It was simple but clean, with a narrow bed and a washstand. She stood in the doorway, looking back at Kade. "Thank you," she said again, "for everything. I still do not understand why you did it, but I am grateful." "Get some rest," Kade said. "Tomorrow we will figure out how to get you to Rattan." He spent the night in the stable with Copper, bedding down in the hay beside his horse. It was not the first time he had slept in worse places, and the hay was softer than the ground. Through the stable wall, he could hear the quiet sounds of the trading post settling in for the night, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to the rising moon. Kade lay awake for a long time, thinking about Zara Thornton and her dark eyes that held too much sadness for someone so young. He thought about the way she had clutched that leather-bound book, and the determination in her voice when she talked about reaching her aunt in Rattan. She was stronger than she looked, he decided. The territory had a way of breaking people, but he had a feeling Zara would bend before she broke. The next morning dawned clear and hot, as most mornings did in New Mexico. Kade woke to the sound of roosters and the smell of coffee drifting from the main building. He fed and watered Copper, then went inside to find Zara already awake, sitting at the table with a cup of coffee and a plate of eggs. "You are up early," he observed. "Could not sleep much," she admitted. "Kept thinking about my wagon and all my supplies. Everything I own is out there." "We will get it back," Kade promised, sitting down across from her. She who waits brought him coffee and breakfast without being asked, and he thanked her with a nod. Samuel joined them, already dressed for the day's work. "Here is what I am thinking," he said. "Warren, you and I will load up that spare wheel in my wagon and head out to Miss Thornton's broken-down rig. We will get the wheels swapped out, then you can go looking for those horses while I guard the wagon. Once we find the horses, we will bring everything back here, and Miss Thornton can continue on to Rattan properly supplied and equipped." "What can I do to help?" Zara asked. "Stay here and rest," Samuel said. "My wife could use some help in the garden if you are feeling up to it, but mostly just recover your strength. This heat will knock you down if you are not careful." Zara looked like she wanted to argue, but she nodded instead. "I can help in the garden. I am not much good at sitting idle." Kade and Samuel set out an hour later, the wagon loaded with tools and the replacement wheel. The morning was still relatively cool, and they made good time along the trail. Samuel kept up a steady stream of conversation, talking about the trading post, about travelers he had met, about the way the territory was changing as more people moved west. "You ever think about settling down?" Samuel asked at one point. "You have been drifting for, 5 years now?" "About that," Kade confirmed. "Since my father's ranch went under, never seemed to find the right place to put down roots." "Or the right reason," Samuel suggested. "A place is just a place. It is the people that make it home." They found Zara's wagon exactly where she had left it, looking forlorn and abandoned in the morning light. Samuel was right about the wheel. It was completely beyond repair, splintered wood scattered in the dust. They set to work removing what was left of the old wheel and fitting the replacement. It was hard, hot work, and by the time they had the new wheel secured, both men were soaked with sweat. But the wheel fit, and the wagon looked sound again. Samuel walked around it, checking the other wheels and the axles, making sure nothing else was about to break. "She was lucky this happened close to the trading post," Samuel said. "Another 50 miles out and she might have died before anyone found her." "Do not say that," Kade said, and he was surprised by the vehemence in his own voice. Samuel gave him a knowing look. "You are sweet on her." I just met her yesterday. That does not answer my question. Kade did not have an answer, not really. He barely knew Zara Thornton, but there was something about her that had gotten under his skin. Maybe it was the way she had not wanted to take his dollar, or the pride in her voice despite her situation. Maybe it was just that she reminded him of himself, alone and struggling to find a place in a world that did not make things easy. I am going to go look for those horses, Kade said, changing the subject. He found them right where Samuel had predicted, grazing peacefully near a creek about 2 miles north. They were a matched pair of bay mares, good solid work horses, and they did not spook when he approached. He managed to catch them both with some gentle coaxing and a few pieces of hardtack from his saddlebag, then led them back to the wagon. By mid-afternoon, they had the horses hitched up and the wagon ready to roll. Samuel drove the wagon while Kade rode Copper alongside, and they made their way back to the trading post as the sun climbed toward its peak. Zara came out to meet them, her face lighting up when she saw her wagon intact. "You found my horses. They were not far," Kade said, dismounting. "Probably have been making trips back and forth to that creek this whole time." She walked around the wagon, checking her supplies, and Kade could see her shoulders relax when she found everything still there. "I cannot believe you did all this. The wheel, finding the horses, everything." "It is what neighbors do," Samuel said. "Even if we just met yesterday, out here we look after each other. It is the only way to survive." That evening, Samuel insisted they all share dinner together. She Who Waits had made a feast by trading post standards, venison stew and cornbread and dried apple pie that tasted like heaven. They ate until they were full, and then sat around the table talking as the light faded outside. Zara told them more about her life in Kansas, about the farm and her late husband, about the dreams she had once had of a different kind of life. Samuel told stories of his trapping days, of winters in the mountains and close calls with bears and hostile tribes. She Who Waits spoke little, but when she did, her words carried weight, observations about the land and the changing seasons that came from a lifetime of living in harmony with this harsh place. Kade found himself watching Zara as she talked and laughed, seeing how the sadness in her eyes lifted when she smiled. She was beautiful, he realized, not in the delicate way of the women in the paintings he had seen in saloons, but in a strong, enduring way that suited this land. After dinner, Kade walked outside to check on Copper and found Zara following him into the cooling evening air. "I have been thinking," she said, "about what you did. About the dollar and the help with the wagon. I still do not understand why." Kade leaned against the corral fence, watching the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky. "You ever notice how sometimes you meet someone and you just feel like helping them is the right thing to do? Not because you expect anything back, but just because it feels right." "I suppose," Zara said quietly. She was standing close enough that he could smell the soap she had used, something floral that seemed out of place in this dusty corner of the world. "My mother used to say that we are all walking each other home," Kade continued. "That life is hard enough without making it harder for each other. I guess I have tried to live by that. Even when it costs you your last dollar. Especially then," Kade said. "Money comes and goes, but the kind of person you are, that stays with you." Zara was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was soft. "I was married for 3 years, and my husband never talked to me the way you do, like my thoughts mattered. Then he was a fool." "He was practical," Zara corrected. "He saw me as a helpmate, someone to cook and clean and eventually bear children. I do not think he ever wondered what I thought about things, what I dreamed about." "What do you dream about?" Kade asked. "Freedom," she said immediately. "Not from marriage or obligation, but just the freedom to choose my own path." To wake up and decide what my day will be. That probably sounds silly. It sounds honest, Kade said, echoing his words from the day before. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars multiply across the sky. Somewhere in the darkness, a coyote called again and another answered from far away. "What about you?" Zara asked. "What do you dream about?" Kade had to think about that. "I guess I dream about finding a place that feels like home. I have been drifting for so long, working one ranch after another, moving on when the job ends or when the restlessness gets too strong. I want to find a place where I can put down roots, build something lasting. Like a ranch of your own, maybe. Or just a piece of land where I can raise some horses, have a garden, something simple." He laughed quietly. "Though I am not sure how I will manage that when I can barely keep myself fed from one week to the next. Things have a way of working out," Zara said. "At least, that is what I keep telling myself." The next morning came too soon. Zara's wagon was ready, her supplies checked and rechecked, the horses fresh and eager to move. Samuel had thrown in some extra food and a blanket, refusing to take payment, and she who waits had given Zara a small pouch of herbs, explaining in her quiet way that they were good for headaches and stomach troubles. Kade had planned to say goodbye and head on toward Rattan and that ranch job, but when the time came to part ways, he found he could not do it. "I will ride with you to Rattan," he heard himself say. "Make sure you get there safe." Zara looked at him with those dark eyes, and he saw both gratitude and something else there, something that made his heart beat a little faster. "You do not have to do that." "I know," Kade said, "but I want to." Samuel watched this exchange with barely concealed amusement. "You two be careful on the road. And Warren, you ever decide to stop drifting, you know where to find me. I could always use a good hand around here." They set out as the sun climbed above the eastern mountains, Kade on copper beside Zara's wagon. The trail to Rattan wound through increasingly rugged country, following the course of ancient rivers and skirting the edges of mesas that rose like fortresses from the desert floor. They traveled at an easy pace, stopping frequently to rest the horses and escape the worst of the midday heat. During these stops, they talked. Kade found himself telling Zara things he had not shared with anyone in years, stories about his childhood on the ranch, about his parents, and the hard work of building something from nothing only to lose it all to drought and debt. Zara, in turn, shared more about her life, painting a picture of a lonely existence in Kansas, married to a man who barely saw her as a person. "I think what I regret most is that I never loved him," she said during one of their stops, sitting in the shade of a massive cottonwood tree. "He was not a bad man, just distant. We were strangers who lived in the same house. When he died, I felt guilty because I was not sure what I was supposed to be feeling. Sad for him, certainly, but also relieved, and that made me feel like a terrible person." "You are not terrible," Kade said firmly. "You are just honest. Some people never learn the difference between obligation and love, and it sounds like your marriage was built on the first but never found the second." "Is that sad or just realistic?" "Both, maybe," Kade said. "But it does not have to be that way next time." "Next time," Zara repeated as if testing the words. "I am not sure there will be a next time. I am not sure I want there to be." "You might change your mind," Kade suggested gently. "Maybe," she allowed. "What about you? Have you ever been in love?" "Once," Kade admitted. "A girl I knew growing up, daughter of a neighboring rancher. We had plans to get married, but when my father's ranch failed, her father did not think I was good enough anymore. She married someone else, a man with money and prospects. Last I heard, they moved to California." "Did it hurt?" "Like hell," Kade said. "But it taught me something important. Real love does not disappear when times get hard. If she had loved me the way I loved her, we would have found a way to make it work. So maybe it was not real love after all, just the idea of it. They camped that night beside the trail, Kade insisting that Zara sleep in the wagon while he took a bedroll outside. He built a fire and made coffee, and they sat together watching the flames and listening to the night sounds of the desert. "Can I ask you something?" Zara said after a while. "Anything? Why are you really coming to Rattan with me? And do not say it is just to make sure I am safe." Kade was quiet, considering his answer. "Because I do not want to say goodbye yet," he said finally. "I met you yesterday, but it feels like I have known you longer. Is that strange?" "No," Zara said softly. "I feel it too, like we were supposed to meet on that trail." "Maybe we were," Kade said. The fire popped and crackled, sending sparks up into the night sky. "I have spent 5 years drifting, never feeling connected to anything or anyone. Then I give you my last dollar, and suddenly everything feels different. How so? Like maybe I have been looking for home in places when I should have been looking for it in people." Zara met his eyes across the fire, and in that moment, something shifted between them. It was not just gratitude or circumstance anymore. It was the beginning of something deeper, something that scared and excited him in equal measure. "Kade," she said, and his name on her lips sounded right. "I am not ready for this. I have been widowed less than a year. There are rules about mourning, about what is proper." "I know," he said. "And I am not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know how I feel." "But I feel it too," she admitted, and her voice trembled slightly. "And that terrifies me. What if I am just confused? What if I am mistaking kindness for something more because you are the first person in so long who has treated me like I matter?" "Then we will figure it out together," Kade said. "We do not have to decide anything tonight or tomorrow or next week. We can just take things one day at a time." She nodded, relief evident on her face. "One day at a time. I think I can do that." They reached Rattan 3 days later, the town spreading across a valley with the mountains rising majestically beyond. It was bigger than Cimarron, more established, with actual streets and businesses and a sense of permanence that spoke of ambition and hope. The railroad was coming through, Samuel had told them, and Rattan was positioning itself to be an important stop on the line. Zara's aunt lived in a small house on the edge of town, a neat clapboard structure with a garden in front and chickens pecking in the yard. Her name was Margaret Thornton, a widow herself who had moved west after her husband died in the war. She came out when she heard the wagon, a woman in her 50s with Zara's same dark eyes and a firm, no-nonsense demeanor. "Zara," she called, shielding her eyes against the sun. "Good Lord, child, I have been worried sick. Your letter said you would be here weeks ago." "I had some trouble on the road," Zara said, climbing down from the wagon. "Broken wheel, lost horses. It has been an adventure." Margaret looked at Kade with open curiosity. "And who is this?" "This is Kade Warren," Zara said, and Kade noticed the warmth in her voice when she said his name. "He helped me when my wagon broke down. I would not have made it here without him." "Then you have my thanks," Margaret said, coming forward to shake his hand. Her grip was firm, her eyes assessing. "You look half-starved, both of you do. Come inside and let me feed you properly." Margaret's house was cozy inside, filled with comfortable furniture and the smell of fresh bread. She fed them stew and biscuits and strong tea, and as they ate, Zara told her the story of the journey, though she left out the part about Kade giving her his last dollar. "Well," Margaret said when the tale was done, "you were lucky to find Mr. Warren when you did. The trail can be dangerous for a woman alone." "I am learning that," Zara said. Margaret looked between them, and Kade saw understanding dawn on her face. She was shrewd, this woman, and she could read what was developing between him and Zara as clearly as words on a page. "Mr. Warren, "Do you have plans here in Raton?" she asked. "I was supposed to start work at a ranch outside town," Kade said. "A man named Hollis Walker is looking for hands." "Hollis is a good man," Margaret confirmed. "Fair employer, pays on time, you could do worse." "I should probably ride out there today," Kade said, though he found himself reluctant to leave. "Let him know I have arrived. Or you could go tomorrow," Margaret suggested. "Stay for supper, meet some of the neighbors. I am having a few people over tonight, just a casual gathering. You would be welcome." Kade looked at Zara, who nodded slightly. "I would like you to stay," she said quietly. "Then I will stay," Kade agreed. That evening, Margaret's house filled with neighbors and friends, people who came to welcome Zara and meet the mysterious cowboy who had helped her. There was Doc Sanders, the town physician, a cheerful man with a booming laugh. There was Elizabeth Walker, Hollis Walker's wife, a practical woman who ran the general store. There was a schoolteacher named Nathan Wright and his wife Sarah, and a dozen others whose names and faces blurred together in the warmth and noise of the gathering. Kade found himself separated from Zara by the crowd, pulled into conversations about the ranch work and the town, and what brought him to Raton. But his eyes kept finding her across the room, watching the way she laughed at something Doc Sanders said, the way she helped Margaret serve coffee and cake, the way she belonged here already in a way he never seemed to belong anywhere. Later, when the guests had gone and Margaret had tactfully excused herself to bed, Kade and Zara found themselves alone on the front porch. The night was cool, a welcome change from the heat of the day, and the sky was so full of stars it looked like someone had spilled diamonds across black velvet. "Your aunt is nice," Kade said. "She is," Zara agreed. "I think I will be happy here, I am glad." They were quiet for a moment, and then Zara said, "What happens now? I go to work for Hollis Walker," Kade said. "You settle in with your aunt. We see each other around town. And that is it." "That is up to you," Kade said carefully. "I told you before I am not asking for anything, but if you want to see where this goes, I am willing to wait until you are ready." Zara turned to face him fully, and in the starlight her face was beautiful and serious. "I have spent 3 years in a marriage where I felt nothing, where I was just going through the motions of what I thought life should be. These last few days with you, I have felt more alive than I have in years. But I am scared, Kade. I am scared of moving too fast, of making another mistake, of hurting you or myself. So we will go slow," Kade said. "As slow as you need. You would really wait for me, as long as it takes," he promised. She reached out and took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. "Then I would like to see where this goes." Kade started working at the Walker Ranch the next day, and quickly discovered that Hollis Walker was indeed a good man to work for. The ranch was well run, the other hands were decent fellows, and the work was hard but satisfying. Kade was assigned to help with the horses, breaking and training the wild mustangs that Hollis bought from traders and turned into working cow ponies. It was work Kade was good at, work he loved. He had a way with horses, a patience and understanding that made the animals trust him. Within weeks, Hollis was giving him more responsibility, and the other hands began to respect him as more than just another drifter passing through. But the best part of those weeks was seeing Zara. He visited Margaret's house on Sundays, when the ranch gave him time off, and they would go for walks around town or sit on the porch talking for hours. Sometimes Margaret joined them, her sharp wit and wisdom adding depth to their conversations. Other times she gave them space, trusting them to behave with propriety. Slowly, carefully, Kade and Zara grew closer. He learned her favorite foods, her dreams for the future, the way she laughed at his terrible jokes. She learned about his childhood, his fears and hopes, the loneliness that had driven him from place to place. They did not rush. did not push for more than friendship and growing affection, but anyone who saw them together could see where things were heading. 3 months after Kade arrived in Repay on a Sunday afternoon in late autumn, he asked Zara to marry him. They were sitting by a creek outside town, watching the water tumble over rocks, and the words came out naturally, as if they had been waiting all along. "Marry me," he said. "Not tomorrow or next week, but when you are ready. Marry me and let me spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret it." Zara looked at him with tears in her eyes. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I will marry you." "You are sure?" Kade asked, needing to hear it again. "I have never been more sure of anything," she said. "I love you, Kade Warren. I think I started loving you the moment you gave me that $1, but I was too scared and confused to recognize it. But I am not scared anymore." "I love you too," Kade said. And then he kissed her for the first time, a gentle kiss that tasted of joy and promise and new beginnings. They waited until spring to marry, giving Zara time to properly mourn her first husband and for the town to see that their love was real and lasting. Margaret helped plan the wedding, which was held in the small church in Repay with what seemed like the entire town in attendance. Kade wore his best clothes, which Hollies had helped him buy with an advance on his wages. Zara wore a simple blue dress that matched her eyes and made her look like she had stepped out of a dream. Doc Sanders gave her away, Margaret standing beside her, and when the preacher asked if Kade would take Zara as his wife, he said, "I will," with such conviction that several women in the congregation dabbed at their eyes. The wedding breakfast was held at Margaret's house, which overflowed with well-wishers and more food than seemed possible. Hollies and Elizabeth Walker gave them a set of china as a wedding gift. Doc Sanders gave them medical supplies and a promise to deliver their babies when the time came. Samuel Harris and She Who Waits even made the trip from the trading post, bringing with them a beautiful blanket that She Who Waits had woven herself. "I knew you were sweet on her," Samuel said to Kade with a grin. "Saw it the moment you gave her that $1. "Best $1 I ever spent," Kade agreed. Hollies had offered Kade a small house on the ranch property, one of several that housed the married hands and their families. It was simple but sturdy, 2 rooms with a fireplace and a porch that looked out toward the mountains. Zara had spent weeks making it into a home, sewing curtains, arranging furniture that neighbors had donated or sold them cheaply, planting a garden beside the front door. Their first night as husband and wife, they sat on that porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and red and purple. "Happy?" Kade asked, his arm around Zara's shoulders. "Happier than I knew was possible," she said, leaning against him. "Is this real? Sometimes I am afraid I will wake up and find it was all a dream." "It is real," Kade assured her. "You are stuck with me now." "Good," Zara said. "Because I plan to keep you for a very long time." The first year of their marriage was everything Kade had hoped for and more. He continued to work with the horses, gaining a reputation as one of the best trainers in the territory. Hollies began sending buyers to him specifically, and the extra commissions meant that Kade and Zara could start saving money, dreaming about maybe buying their own piece of land someday. Zara worked in town, helping Margaret with her seamstress business and occasionally helping Elizabeth at the general store. She was quick and clever with numbers, and Elizabeth soon put her in charge of the accounts, paying her a fair wage for work that Zara found satisfying. They made friends, put down roots, became part of the community in a way that felt permanent and right. Kade no longer felt the restless urge to move on, to find something better over the next horizon. He had found what he was looking for, and it was not a place but a person, just as he had suspected that night by the campfire. In the spring of 1881, Zara told Kade she was pregnant. He whooped with joy and picked her up, spinning her around until she laughingly begged him to put her down. They told Margaret that same day, and the older woman wept with happiness, talking about how wonderful it would be to have a baby in the house again. Doc Sanders confirmed the pregnancy and predicted a late autumn birth. Zara bloomed with it, her face glowing with health and happiness. Kade became almost ridiculously protective, worrying about her working too hard, insisting she rest more than she wanted to. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she told him one evening when he tried to stop her from carrying a basket of laundry. "I know," Kade said. "But you are carrying my whole world in there, so forgive me for being careful." She softened at that, kissing him gently. "Our whole world," she corrected. "And yes, I forgive you." Their son was born on a cold November night, arriving after a labor that terrified Kade and left Zara exhausted but triumphant. Doc Sanders handed Kade the squalling infant wrapped in one of She Who Waits' blankets, and Kade looked down into that tiny red face and felt his heart expand in ways he had not known were possible. "What should we name him?" Zara asked, tired but smiling from the bed. They had discussed names for months, going back and forth, never quite settling on one they both loved. But looking at his son now, Kade knew. "James," he said. "After my father, James Warren." "James," Zara repeated, testing it. "I like it. Hello, James. Welcome to the world." James was a good baby, healthy and happy, with his mother's dark eyes and his father's stubbornness. Kade learned to change diapers and walk the floor at night, singing off key lullabies that seemed to work despite his terrible voice. Zara nursed and loved and worried in the way of all new mothers, but she took to motherhood with the same determination she brought to everything else. Margaret was a constant presence, helping with the baby, teaching Zara the things her own mother had never lived long enough to teach her. The house that had started as just a structure became a true home, filled with laughter and love and the chaos that comes with a baby. 2 years later, their daughter arrived, another November baby. They named her Emily, and she was the image of her mother, with the same dark hair and quiet strength. James was fascinated by his little sister, hovering over her cradle and bringing her the treasures he found around the ranch, rocks and feathers, and once, memorably, a very confused frog. Kade continued to work for Holly's, but he had also started buying land. Just a few acres at first, enough for some horses of his own. Then more as the years passed and their savings grew. By 1885, he had enough land and horses to start his own small operation, though he continued to work with Holly's as well, the two men having become genuine friends. The railroad came through Raton in 1886, just as people had predicted, and the town boomed. New businesses opened, new families arrived, and Raton transformed from a frontier town into something more permanent and civilized. Margaret's seamstress business thrived, and Zara took over more of the business side, helping her aunt expand and hire additional seamstresses. In 1887, they had another son, Henry, who arrived in the middle of a spring thunderstorm. He was the loudest of their children, demanding and imperious from his first breath, but he had a smile that could melt hearts. James and Emily adored their baby brother, though Emily maintained a certain big sister exasperation with both boys that made the adults laugh. The house on the Walker Ranch had become too small, so Kade built a new one on their own land, a larger house with room for their growing family and any future additions. It was not fancy, but it was solid and comfortable, with a big porch and a view of the mountains that never got old. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Kade and Zara sat on that porch after the children were asleep, watching the stars and reflecting on the years that had passed. "You remember that day on the trail?" Zara asked. "When you gave me your last $1. "I remember everything about that day," Kade said. "I remember thinking you were the most determined person I had ever met." "I was terrified," Zara admitted. "I was out of money, out of options, and then this cowboy appeared out of nowhere and gave me everything he had. I did not understand it then. And now I understand that some people are just built to be kind," she said. "That you saw someone who needed help and you helped, simple as that. It was not about getting something in return or being thanked. It was just who you are." "I got plenty in return," Kade pointed out. "I got you." "We got each other," Zara corrected. She took his hand, their fingers interlacing in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. "When I asked you how I could repay you, I had no idea the answer would be this. A life, a family, a love that still surprises me every day." "You repaid me the moment you said yes," Kade said. "Everything else has been interest." She laughed at that, the sound mixing with the night breeze and the distant call of an owl. "I love you, Kade Warren. I loved you when you were down to your last dollar, and I love you now that we have built this life together." "I love you too," he said, pulling her close. "Always have, always will." Margaret passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1889, surrounded by the family she had helped build. Zara mourned deeply, but there was comfort in knowing that her aunt had lived to see her happy, to know her great nieces and nephews, to be part of something lasting. They buried her in the Rattan cemetery, and half the town came to pay their respects to a woman who had been a pillar of the community. That same year, Kade and Zara bought the land adjacent to their property, nearly doubling their holdings. The horse business was thriving, and Kade had taken on 2 young men to help with the training. James, now 8 years old, was already showing an aptitude for working with the horses, spending every free moment in the corrals watching his father work. In 1890, Zara discovered she was pregnant again, a surprise but a welcome one. This pregnancy was harder than the others, and Doc Sanders, now in his 70s, worried about her age and the demands of carrying another child. But Zara was determined, and in the winter of 1891, she gave birth to twin girls, Margaret and Rose, named for grandmothers the girls would never meet, but whose love had shaped the family they were born into. The twins were healthy despite arriving early, and the house exploded with activity as 5 children under 10 filled every corner with noise and life. Kade hired a young woman from town to help Zara, and together they managed the beautiful chaos of their growing family. James grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved the horses and the land with the same passion as his father. Emily was artistic, always drawing and painting, seeing beauty in everything around her. Henry was the adventurer, constantly getting into mischief and coming home with torn clothes and wild stories. And the twins were inseparable, finishing each other's sentences and communicating in the wordless way of siblings who have never known life apart. The years passed in the way years do when life is full and happy. There were hard times, certainly. Years when the weather was bad and money was tight. Illnesses that scared them and required long nights of worry. Arguments and disagreements and the normal struggles of any marriage and family. But through it all, the foundation that Kade and Zara had built held strong. By 1895, James was 14 and working alongside his father full-time, having inherited Kade's gift with horses. Emily was 12 and had started helping in the general store, Elizabeth Walker having taken her under her wing. Henry was 8 and a terror, beloved by everyone despite his constant schemes. The twins were 4, identical and impossible to tell apart unless you knew them well. Kade was 42 now, his dark hair showing threads of silver, his face weathered by years of outdoor work. But he was healthy and strong, and he still looked at Zara with the same love and wonder he had felt that day on the trail 16 years before. Zara was 38, still beautiful, her strength now tempered with the wisdom that comes from building a life and raising children. She ran the household with the same determination she had shown in surviving that journey from Kansas, and she had become a respected voice in the Raton community, serving on the school board and helping to establish a lending library. One evening in the summer of 1895, as the family sat together on the porch after dinner, James asked the question that Kade and Zara had known would come eventually. "Pa, how did you and Ma meet?" The younger children leaned forward eagerly. They had heard bits and pieces of the story over the years, but never the whole thing. Kade looked at Zara, who nodded with a smile. "Well," he began, "it was 1879 and I was down to my last dollar." He told them the story then, all of it. The dust devil on the trail, the broken wagon, the decision to give Zara his last money. He told them about Samuel's trading post and the journey to Raton, about falling in love while trying not to, about realizing that home was not a place but a person. Zara added her perspective, talking about her fear and loneliness, about being saved by a stranger who asked for nothing in return, about learning what real love looked like. When they finished, Emily was crying softly, and even James looked moved. Henry declared it the best story he had ever heard, and the twins wanted to know if they could meet Samuel and She Who Waits. "Maybe next summer," Kade promised. "It has been a while since we made that trip." "Pa," James said quietly, "what would have happened if you had not helped Ma that day?" Kade considered the question seriously. "I do not know, son, but I know I could not have lived with myself if I had just ridden past, even though it was your last dollar, especially because it was my last dollar," Kade said. "Sometimes the most important things we do are the ones that cost us the most. But you got Ma out of it," Henry pointed out pragmatically, "so it worked out." "I did not help your mother because I wanted something from her," Kade corrected gently. "I helped her because it was the right thing to do. The fact that we fell in love was a blessing I never expected or earned." "You earned it," Zara said firmly. "Every day since then you have earned it." In 1898, James married a girl from town, a sweet-natured young woman named Lucy who loved horses almost as much as he did. They built a small house on the property, and Kade officially made James a partner in the horse business. Watching his son take his vows, Kade remembered his own wedding day, the joy and terror and hope all mixed together, and he felt a deep satisfaction knowing that he had given his children a different kind of life than he had known. Emily, at 15, announced her intention to go to Denver for art school. Zara had initially worried about sending her daughter so far away, but Kade convinced her to let Emily follow her dreams. They scraped together the tuition, and in the fall of 1899 they put Emily on the train with a trunk full of clothes and art supplies, and more love than anyone could carry. Henry declared he was going to join the cavalry, but at 13 he had plenty of time to change his mind a dozen more times. The twins were 8 now, growing into their own personalities. Margaret was studious and serious, always rating. Rose was outgoing and charming, able to talk anyone into anything. In 1900, Lucy gave birth to Kade and Zara's first grandchild, a boy they named Kade after his grandfather. Holding that tiny infant, Kade felt the circle of life complete itself in a way that was both profound and humbling. He was no longer just a son and a father, but a grandfather, a link in a chain that stretched back to his own parents and forward to generations yet unborn. "Can you believe this?" he asked Zara that night as they lay in bed. "We have a grandchild." "I can believe it," Zara said, snuggling against him. "We have been building toward this for 20 years. "21 years this spring," Kade corrected. "21 years since I gave you my last dollar." "Best investment you ever made," Zara teased. No argument there. They were quiet for a moment, and then Zara said, "Do you ever regret it? The life we built, the choices we made?" "Not for a single second," Kade said without hesitation. "You, not one," Zara confirmed. "I spent 3 years in a marriage where I felt like I was dying slowly, and then I spent 21 years in one where I felt fully alive. There is no comparison." "We have been lucky," Kade said. "We have been blessed," Zara corrected. "And we have worked hard." Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity, and we prepared for this life by choosing each other every single day. "Very philosophical," Kade observed. "Well, I have been reading Margaret's books again," Zara admitted. "She always did have a way with words." In 1902, Emily returned from Denver, not just with an education but with a husband, a fellow artist named Thomas who was from Boston but had fallen in love with the West. They settled in Raton, and Emily opened a small studio where she taught art and sold her paintings to the tourists who came through on the railroad. Henry did join the cavalry after all, much to his parents' worry. But the frontier wars were mostly over by then, and his service was more about maintaining order than fighting. He came home on leave whenever he could, full of stories and swagger, and Zara clutched him tight every time he left, praying he would return safe. The twins both married in 1906, a double wedding that was the social event of the year in Raton. Margaret married a banker from town, a steady young man who appreciated her intelligence. Rose married a lawyer who had recently opened a practice, charmed into proposal by her sparkling personality. By 1908, Kade was 55 and Zara was 51. Their hair was silver now, their faces lined with the years, but they moved through life with the ease of people who were comfortable in their own skin and with each other. The horse business had made them prosperous, not wealthy but secure, with enough to help their children when needed and enough to retire comfortably when the time came. James and Lucy had given them 4 grandchildren by then, 2 boys and 2 girls. Emily and Thomas had twin boys, which made the family joke about twins running in the bloodline. Henry had married during his service and had a daughter, though he was still in the cavalry. Margaret had a son, and Rose was expecting her first child. On a warm evening in May 1909, exactly 30 years after they had met on that dusty trail, Kade and Zara sat on their porch watching the sunset. The house was quiet, the grandchildren having gone home, and for once they had the place to themselves. 30 years, Zara said, echoing his thoughts. 3 decades since you gave me that dollar. Worth every penny, Kade said. It was only 1 penny, Zara pointed out. Well, 100 pennies. You know what I mean. She did. She always did. They had reached the point in their marriage where words were often unnecessary, where a look or a touch could communicate volumes. Kade, Zara said after a while. Yes, thank you. For what? For everything, she said. For seeing me when I was broken down on the side of the trail and choosing to help. For giving me not just that dollar, but every day since then. For building this life with me, for our children and grandchildren, for every moment we have shared. I should be thanking you, Kade said. You took a chance on a broke cowboy with nothing but good intentions and a worn-out horse. I saw something in you that day, Zara said. Something that told me you were different, that you were worth knowing, and I have spent 30 years discovering I was right. We have been good for each other, Kade agreed. The best, Zara said. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and rose and purple, the mountains standing eternal against the changing light. Somewhere in the corrals a horse whinnied. From the direction of James's house came the distant sound of children laughing. The evening breeze carried the scent of roses from Zara's garden, the same garden she had planted when they first moved into this house. "You remember asking me what I dreamed about," Zara said. "That night at Samuel's trading post, I remember. You said you dreamed about freedom." "I found it," she said. "Not the way I expected, but I found it. The freedom to choose my own path, to wake up and decide what my day will be. And I chose this every day. I chose you." "And I chose you," Kade said, taking her hand. "Every day for 30 years and every day for however many we have left." "Promise me something," Zara said. "Anything." "Promise me that when we are old and gray, well, older and grayer, and our children ask us if we would do it all again, you will say yes." "I promise," Kade said, "though I will probably add that you were a lot of trouble." She laughed and swatted his arm. "I was not the one who broke my leg trying to impress me by riding that wild stallion." "That was one time," Kade protested, "and I did impress you, admit it." "I was impressed by your stupidity," Zara said, but she was smiling. "But I loved you anyway." "And I love you," Kade said, growing serious. "Then, now, always." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, they sat together in the home they had built, surrounded by the life they had created from nothing but hope and one silver dollar. It had not been an easy life, but it had been a good one, full of love and laughter and the kind of happiness that comes from choosing each other, again and again, through all the years. Henry retired from the cavalry in 1912 and came home to Raton, bringing his wife and daughter with him. He bought land adjacent to the family property and started raising cattle, joking that someone in the family needed to diversify beyond horses. Kade, now 59, had officially retired from the day-to-day work of the horse business, though he still spent time in the corrals teaching his grandchildren the skills he had learned over a lifetime. Zara had also slowed down, spending her time with grandchildren, reading and tending her ever-expanding garden. She had 15 grandchildren now, with more on the way, and she delighted in spoiling them in the way of grandmothers everywhere. One afternoon in the summer of 1913, as Kade and Zara sat in the garden watching the youngest grandchildren play, Samuel Harris and She Who Waits made a surprise visit. Both were elderly now, Samuel white-haired and moving slowly, She Who Waits still silent and wise. They had sold the trading post years before and lived with one of She Who Waits's nephews on the reservation. "Could not let another year pass without seeing how you two were doing," Samuel said, settling carefully into the chair Kade offered. "Figured I better make the trip while I still could." They spent the afternoon reminiscing, telling the old stories, laughing about the young people they had been when they first met. Samuel told them about selling the trading post, about how the territory had changed so much it was barely recognizable. "Remember when this was all wild country?" Samuel said, gesturing broadly. "Now there are towns every few miles, the railroad running through, automobiles on the roads. World is moving so damn fast." "Some things do not change, though," Kade said, looking at Zara. "Some things stay constant." "Love," She Who Waits said quietly, speaking for the first time that afternoon. "Love stays." "Yes," Zara agreed. "It does." When Samuel and She Who Waits left the next day, Kade and Zara stood waving until the wagon disappeared down the road. They both knew, without saying it, that this might be the last time they saw their old friends. But there was comfort in knowing they had shared this afternoon, this connection to the beginning of their story. "We have been blessed with good friends," Zara said as they walked back to the house, her hand in his. "We have been blessed in every way," Kade agreed. In 1915, the family gathered for Kade and Zara's 36th wedding anniversary. All 5 of their children were there, along with their spouses and all 19 grandchildren, ranging in age from newborn to 15. The house and yard overflowed with family, noise, laughter, and love. James, now 36 and looking more like Kade every year, stood to make a toast. "To my parents," he said, raising his glass, "who showed us all what real love looks like, who built a life from nothing but determination and faith in each other, who gave us the greatest gift parents can give their children, the security of knowing we were loved." "Hear, hear," the others echoed, raising their glasses. Later, when most of the family had gone home and only a few lingering grandchildren remained, James approached his parents. "Pa, Ma, I have been thinking about something." "What is that, son?" Kade asked. "You should write down your story," James said. "How you met, how you built this life. The grandchildren would love to have it, and their children after them." "We are not writers," Zara protested. "You do not have to be," Emily said, joining the conversation. She had been standing nearby with Thomas. "Just tell it the way you told us that night on the porch. I will write it down if you want. Make sure it is preserved." Kade looked at Zara, and she nodded slowly. "All right," he agreed. "But you have to promise to tell the truth, even the parts that make us look foolish or scared." "Especially those parts," Zara added. "The story does not mean anything if we pretend it was easy." So over the following months, Kade and Zara sat with Emily and told her everything. The fear and uncertainty of those early days, the challenges of building a life, the joy and sorrow that came with raising children. Emily wrote it all down in her neat hand, and when she was done, she had the pages bound into a book that she gave to her parents for Christmas. "For your grandchildren and their grandchildren," Emily said, "so they will always know where they came from." Kade turned the pages carefully, seeing their life laid out in words, and felt his throat tighten with emotion. "This is beautiful, Emily. Thank you." "Thank you," Emily said, "for giving us a story worth telling." In 1918, Kade fell ill with pneumonia during a harsh winter. At 65, he did not bounce back as quickly as he once would have, and for several terrifying weeks, Zara thought she might lose him. She sat by his bedside day and night, refusing to leave, holding his hand and talking to him even when he was too weak to respond. "You cannot leave me yet," she told him one night when his fever was at its worst. "We still have too much to do, too many grandchildren to meet, too many sunsets to watch together. You promise me always, Kade Warren, and I am holding you to that." Whether her words reached him or whether his stubborn constitution simply refused to give up, Kade began to improve. By spring, he was back on his feet, thinner and weaker but alive. The experience sobered them both, a reminder that their time was not infinite. "I am not ready to leave you," Kade said one evening as he sat on the porch for the first time since his illness. "But I am glad to know that when the time comes, we will have had a life worth living." "We are not done yet," Zara said firmly. "You are going to recover fully, and we are going to have many more years together." She was right. Kade did recover, and though he never regained all his strength, he lived fully in the years that followed. He spent his time with his family, particularly the grandchildren, teaching them about horses and the land and the value of keeping your word. Samuel Harris died in 1920, and She Who Waits followed him 6 months later, as if she could not bear to be without him. Kade and Zara made the difficult journey to attend both funerals, paying their respects to the friends who had been there at the beginning of their story. "We are the last ones left from that time," Zara said as they traveled home. "Everyone else who was part of our beginning is gone." "But we have told the story," Kade reminded her. "Emily wrote it down. Samuel and She Who Waits and Margaret will live on through our grandchildren knowing about them." In 1924, James and Lucy celebrated their 26th wedding anniversary, and Kade looked at his son with his wife and their grown children and felt a deep satisfaction. They had done it. He and Zara had built something lasting, something that would continue long after they were gone. By 1925, Kade was 72 and Zara was 68. Their grandchildren had started having children, making them great-grandparents. The family now spanned 4 generations, all still connected, all still gathering for holidays and celebrations at the big house that Kade had built so many years before. On a spring evening in 1925, 46 years after they met on that dusty trail, Kade and Zara sat on their porch watching another sunset. They did this most evenings now, treasuring the quiet time together, the familiar comfort of each other's presence. "You ever think about that day?" Zara asked. "The day we met? I think about it often," Kade admitted. "I think about how close I came to just riding past, about how different my life would have been if I had." "Do you regret giving me that dollar?" "Giving you that dollar was the smartest thing I ever did," Kade said firmly. "It bought me a life I never could have imagined." "You bought us both a life," Zara said. "I was so lost that day, Kade. My wagon was broken, my horses were gone, and I had no idea what I was going to do. And then you appeared like an answer to a prayer I had not even known to make." "You would have figured something out," Kade said. "You were strong even then." "Maybe," Zara allowed, "but I would not have had this life, this love, this family. That was all because of you, because of us," Kade corrected. "We built this together." They sat in silence for a while, watching the familiar mountains turn purple in the fading light. From somewhere inside the house came the sound of their great-grandchildren playing, visiting for the weekend. The sound made Kade smile. "We did good, did not we?" he said. "We did very good," Zara agreed. She turned to look at him, her eyes still dark and bright despite her age. "I love you, Kade Warren. I have loved you for 46 years, and I will love you for whatever time we have left." "I love you too," Kade said, taking her hand. Their fingers interlaced automatically, the gesture as natural as breathing. "You asked me once how you could repay me for that dollar. You have repaid me every day since, just by being you, just by choosing to build this life with me." "Then I would say we are even," Zara said with a smile. "Though I think I might still owe you for all the times you have put up with my stubbornness." "And I owe you for putting up with mine," Kade countered. "So let us call it even and move on." As the stars began to appear, they remained on the porch, neither wanting to break the spell of this perfect moment. Around them, the ranch settled into nighttime quiet, the horses peaceful in their corrals, the cattle lowing softly in the distance. This land, this home, this life, it was all built on the foundation of a single act of kindness. A silver dollar given to a stranger who became everything. In the house behind them, their great-grandchildren played, carrying forward the legacy that Kade and Zara had created. Their children slept peacefully, knowing they were loved and secure. The generations connected like links in a chain, each one made possible by the choice Kade had made on a dusty trail in 1879. "You know what the best part is," Zara said, breaking the comfortable silence. "What is that?" "If I could go back to that day, knowing everything that would happen, all the joy and the sorrow and the hard work and the love, I would not change a single thing." "Neither would I," Kade agreed. "Not one thing." They sat together as the night deepened, two people who had found each other against all odds and built a life that mattered. The silver dollar was long gone, spent on a meal and a night's shelter at a trading post that no longer existed. But what it had purchased: a chance, a beginning, a future that remained as solid and enduring as the mountains that stood watch over their home. Kade and Zara would have many more years together, growing older but never losing the connection that had sparked that day on the trail. They would welcome more great-grandchildren and eventually even great-great-grandchildren. They would watch the West continue to change, the frontier closing, the old ways giving way to the new. But through it all, they would have each other, and that would be enough. Because sometimes, all it takes is $1 and one act of kindness to change everything. To turn two strangers into a family, to transform loneliness into love, to prove that the best investments are the ones we make in each other. Kade Warren had been down to his last dollar when he met Zara Thornton, but in giving it away, he had gained everything that mattered. And that, in the end, was the story they would leave behind, not of what they had accumulated or achieved, but of what they had built together from nothing but hope and faith, and one silver dollar given freely on a dusty trail in the New Mexico Territory in the spring of 1879. The years continued to pass, each one adding new chapters to their remarkable story. In 1928, the family celebrated Kade and Zara's 49th wedding anniversary with a massive gathering that brought relatives from across the state. Kade was 75 now, moving slowly but still sharp in mind and spirit. Zara, at 71, had mellowed with age but retained the determination that had seen her through so many challenges. They stood together as their family toasted them. 5 children, 23 grandchildren, and an astonishing 47 great-grandchildren, with more on the way. Looking out at all those faces, seeing his eyes and Zara's reflected back through the generations, Kade felt a profound sense of completion. That night, alone in their bedroom, Zara said, "Next year will be 50 years. "I know," Kade said. "Hard to believe, is not it? Sometimes I still feel like that scared woman on the trail, wondering if I would survive the day. Then I look around at everything we have built, and I can hardly believe it is real." "It is real," Kade assured her. "Every bit of it. They never made it to that 50th anniversary." In the winter of 1929, Zara caught a cold that developed into pneumonia. Despite the best efforts of the doctors, despite Kade sitting by her bedside the way she had once sat by his, her body, weakened by age, could not fight it off. On a snowy February morning, with her children and grandchildren gathered around, Zara Thornton Warren passed away peacefully in the house she had made a home. Her hand was clasped in Kade's, and her last words were, "Thank you for the life." The funeral was held on a bitterly cold day, but the church was packed with people whose lives Zara had touched over her 50 years in Raton. They buried her in the town cemetery, next to the plot that would one day hold Kade, under a headstone that read, "Beloved wife, mother, grandmother, and friend." Kade moved through the following months in a daze. His children worried about him, seeing how he struggled without Zara by his side. For 50 years, she had been his partner in everything, and her absence left a hole that nothing could fill. But he had promised her a life worth living, and he was determined to honor that promise even now. He spent time with his grandchildren and great-grandchildren, telling them stories about their grandmother, making sure they understood the remarkable woman she had been. He tended her garden, keeping it as beautiful as she had always maintained it. He sat on the porch every evening, watching the sunset and talking to her as if she were still beside him. In the spring of 1930, Kade gathered his family together. "I want to tell you about the day I met your mother," he said to his children. "The real story, every detail." They sat for hours as he recounted it all, his voice sometimes breaking with emotion but never faltering. He told them about being down to his last dollar, about seeing Zara stranded on the trail, about the choice he had made that changed everything. He told them about falling in love slowly, about building a life together, about the daily decision to choose each other over and over again. "That dollar was the best investment I ever made," he said at the end. "Not because of what I got back, though I got everything, but because it was the right thing to do. Your mother taught me that doing right does not always come easy, but it always comes good in the end." James, now 51 and gray himself, said, "You gave us an incredible legacy, Pa. Not just the land or the business, but the example of how to live with integrity and love." "That was not me," Kade said. "That was your mother. She was the strong one, the determined one. I just tried to keep up." On a warm evening in May 1930, exactly 51 years after he gave Zara his last dollar, Kade sat on the porch watching the sunset. He felt tired, more than he usually did, and there was a strange peace settling over him. He thought about Zara, about the life they had built, about the family that would continue long after he was gone. He thought about that dusty trail and the choice he had made, about how one moment of kindness had rippled out through time to create all of this. "I am ready," he said quietly to the evening air, to Zara, to whatever came next. "Thank you for the life." Kade Warren died peacefully in his sleep that night, his children finding him the next morning in his chair on the porch, a slight smile on his weathered face. They buried him next to Zara on a beautiful spring day, under a headstone that matched hers. But the story did not end there. It continued through their children, who passed on the values they had learned. It continued through their grandchildren, who remembered the stories and the lessons. It continued through the great and great-great-grandchildren, who grew up knowing that their family had been built on a foundation of kindness and love. Emily's book, the story she had written down, became a treasured family heirloom, passed from generation to generation. Each new child in the family eventually heard the tale of how their great-great-grandfather had given his last dollar to a stranger, and how that stranger had become his wife and their matriarch. The ranch that Kade and Zara built remained in the family, growing and changing with the times, but never losing its essential character. The house that Kade built with his own hands stood for decades more, weathering storms and seasons, sheltering new generations of children who played in the same yard where their ancestors had played. In time, the silver dollar itself became legendary within the family, though no one knew what had become of the actual coin. It had been spent at that trading post in 1879, exchanged for a meal and a room, and then passed through countless other hands. But its value, the incalculable worth of that one act of generosity that remained forever, the story of Kade and Zara became a touchstone, a reminder that the best things in life often come from the simplest acts of kindness. That a life worth living is built not on what we accumulate, but on how we treat others. That love, real and lasting love, is not about grand gestures but about showing up every day and choosing each other again. Their legacy was not just the descendants who carried their blood, though those numbered in the hundreds as the years passed. It was also the example they set, the proof that one person can make a difference, that a stranger can become family, that a single dollar given freely can purchase something far more valuable than money can buy. And on quiet evenings in the little town of Raton, New Mexico, when the descendants of Kade and Zara gathered to watch the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and red, they would sometimes raise a glass to the cowboy who gave his last dollar and the woman who asked how she could repay him. The answer, they all knew, was in everything around them: the family, the love, the life that continued to flourish from that one seed of kindness planted so long ago on a dusty trail in 1879.